I want you to picture a scenario. It's, I don't know, 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. You aren't heartbroken, exactly. You aren't sobbing into a pillow. You're just bored.
A little restless.
Yeah, restless. You're scrolling through your phone. The world feels kind of gray. And then your thumb just hovers over a name. It's not a new crush. It's not someone you see a future with. It's an ex.
Or that situationship that kind of fizzled out 6 months ago.
Exactly. The dreaded "you up" text, or the digital equivalent of it.
Right.
And here's the thing. If someone asked you why you were reaching out, you couldn't give them a good answer. You know they aren't the one. You know the conversation's going to be the same 5 sentences you always swap. But you do it anyway.
Go over. You hook up, you leave.
Yeah. And it's this cycle that feels inevitable, but totally illogical.
Well, it feels illogical because we're usually looking at it through the lens of romance or love,
Right.
We assume that intimacy has to imply a desire for connection.
But what if it's not about that at all?
What if it's about something else entirely?
And that is the cliff we are jumping off today. We are unpacking an essay that, honestly, it kind of wrecked me when I read it. It's by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha, titled "Sex as a Way of Being Chosen Again."
It's a really striking piece of writing. Malha takes this very messy, often shameful experience, the late-night backslide, and he treats it with serious philosophical weight.
He really does. He argues that in these moments, sex stops being about pleasure or intimacy and becomes a mechanism for something else. He calls it reinstatement.
Which sounds like something that happens to a suspended police officer, not a romantic partner.
Right, it sounds so bureaucratic. But the precision is the point.
It is. Malha's central thesis is that the pullback to an old partner isn't about the person. It's about a specific psychological hunger to be selected, to be confirmed.
It is, quite literally, the desire to be chosen again.
Exactly.
So today isn't a dating advice column. We aren't here to tell you to block your ex, though, maybe you should.
So we're not judging.
No. We're here to understand the human logic beneath that impulse. We're going to look at why that validation feels like oxygen, why it's so addictive, and the massive cost we pay when we settle for being chosen instead of being known.
And that distinction between being chosen and being known, that's everything.
So let's start with the how. Because Malha points out something that I think runs contrary to every romantic comedy I've ever seen.
Oh, totally.
We have this script in our heads that going back to an ex is this dramatic, stormy event. You run into each other in the rain, emotions flare, and you just can't help yourself.
Right. The collapse into longing, the sudden surge of uncontrollable heat. But Malha argues the reality is almost the exact opposite.
It's boring.
Well, boring might be a bit harsh, but he describes the return as arriving quietly. It doesn't kick down the door. It comes dressed as familiarity or comfort. Malha uses this phrase I absolutely love. He says it follows the absence of friction.
The absence of friction. That really sticks with me.
Well, think about physics for a second. Friction is what happens when you try to move something new, right? If you go on a first date with a stranger, that is a high-friction environment.
Oh, completely. You have to explain your job, your weird relationship with your mother, your allergies.
Yeah.
You have to be on.
It's a performance. It's exhausting. But with the ex, the path is smooth. You already know how they take their coffee. You know which side of the bed they sleep on.
You know what makes them laugh.
Exactly. The infrastructure of intimacy is already built. You don't have to build the bridge. You just have to walk across it.
That is such a dangerous comfort, though. It's like the world is hard. My job is stressful. Dating apps are a literal dumpster fire.
Right.
But this specific door, it's already unlocked. I don't even have to turn the handle.
And that's the trap. Malha points out that an invitation appears, a text, a look that requires no decision-making.
The decision feels like it was already made 3 years ago.
Yes. You aren't making a new choice, you're just stepping back into a stream that's already flowing.
But is it just laziness? Because path of least resistance makes it sound like we're just doing it because we're tired. I feel like there's a sharper hook than that.
You're right. It's not just laziness. This is where Malha introduces the concept of residue.
Okay.
He explains that being chosen once, even if the relationship wasn't perfect, even if it ended in a screaming match, it leaves a mark.
A mark.
It leaves the knowledge that you were, at least for a moment, singled out. Malha writes that you are lifted from the field of the ordinary.
Lifted from the field of the ordinary. I mean, that's poetic, but let's ground it. It sounds a little bit egocentric, like I was the special one.
It is egocentric, but in a very human, survivalist kind of way. Think about how it feels to walk through a crowded city. You are anonymous, you are just a face in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Malha suggests that being chosen by someone changes your status in the world. It says, out of everyone else, I see this one.
Okay, so when you go back to them, you aren't just going back to a person. You're returning to the scene of the crime where you were made special.
Precisely. And Malha argues that the mind returns to this dynamic not because it expects the relationship to work this time, but because it promises relief.
Relief from what?
Relief from the quieter ache of not being chosen at all.
Wow. So it's a painkiller. You're treating the symptom of feeling invisible.
Yes. And this leads us to the absolute core of his argument, which is about validation as a kind of currency. Malha says that sex in this context is all about re-entering the other person's field of attention.
So it's a signal.
Yeah.
It's basically just waving a flag saying, hey, I'm still here, look at me.
It is proof of existence. I mean, Malha goes quite deep philosophically here. He argues that being chosen confirms that you register in the world, that you have mass.
That you have mass. I like that.
Yeah.
Because modern life can make you feel very weightless sometimes.
Right. You're just a row on a spreadsheet at work. You're a swipe on an app. You're a generic customer to your barista. You feel optional.
Optional is a terrifying word when you apply it to a human being.
It is. And Malha suggests that when someone who has the data on you, who knows your history, circles back and selects you again, it cancels out that optional feeling.
It's a signal that says, out of all the noise of the world, I still see you. You count.
Exactly. And here's the part that might shock people. Malha suggests that for this mechanism to work, the encounter doesn't even need to be fulfilling.
Wait, really? Even if the sex is mediocre?
Yeah.
Even if it's kind of awkward?
Yes, because it's operating as a ritual of reassurance. It just needs to happen.
Oh, wow.
The fact of being touched again, contacted again, is enough to quiet the doubt. The quality of the interaction is secondary to the fact that the interaction is occurring.
That explains so much. It explains why you can leave one of these encounters feeling kind of empty physically or emotionally drained, but still feel oddly stabilized.
Stabilize is the perfect word.
We're like, okay, check that box, I still exist.
But we rarely admit that to ourselves. We don't say, I'm going over there to prove I exist. Malha points out that we tell ourselves incomplete explanations. We say, I'm just available, or it's just easy, or I have needs.
Right, I'm just unencumbered by expectations. You try to make it sound cool and detached.
And Malha says those things aren't lies. They are partially true, but they mask the deeper, more vulnerable reality, which is that the desire to be chosen can outlast the desire for the person doing the choosing.
Oof. You want the feeling of being picked more than you want the person picking you. That is a heavy realization.
Yeah.
It makes the whole thing feel so transactional.
It changes the entire dynamic. And that brings us to the roles involved. Malha breaks this down into the chooser and the chosen.
But wait, hold on. If I'm the one picking up the phone and they answer, aren't we both choosing? It takes two to tango, right?
It's a subtle distinction, but he argues that in this specific dynamic, the reinstatement, the energy isn't mutual, it's directional.
Okay.
You have the person who initiates the validation and the person who receives it.
That sounds kind of predatory when you put it that way. Like there's a power imbalance.
It sounds predatory, but Malha actually says for the people involved, it often feels like clarity.
Clarity.
Yeah.
Being used feels like clarity. How?
In a weird way, yes. Think about the anxiety of modern romance. Do they like me? Who texted last? It's chaos.
It's awful.
But in this dynamic, the roles are assigned. If you are the chosen, you have zero responsibility. You just have to be.
You don't have to court anyone. You don't have to win anyone over. You just have to open the door.
Exactly. One person knocks, the other opens. The anxiety evaporates because the script is already written. It's like being an actor in a play you've performed 100 times. You don't have to improvise. You know your marks.
It's an unspoken agreement. We're both going to play these roles so we can both feel safe for an hour.
Yes. And sex loses its expressive function. It's not about expressing love or passion anymore. It's about enacting positions. There is a specific satisfaction in just occupying the role of the chosen, even if, as Malha writes, little else is being exchanged.
But here is where it gets really frustrating for the person doing it. You usually know what you're doing. Malha talks about this trap of contradiction. It's not like you're blindly stumbling into it. You often know better. You know this person isn't good for you, or at least isn't right for you.
This is one of the most relatable parts of the essay for me. He argues that awareness doesn't stop the repetition. A person can see the limits clearly. They know the conversations aren't getting deeper. They know the future isn't opening up.
But that clarity somehow sharpens the pull rather than diminishing it.
Yes.
Why? Why does knowing it's a dead end make us want it more? That defies all logic.
Mala uses a beautiful metaphor here, the internal landmark.
I loved this part. Break that down for us.
Okay, so imagine that being chosen once created a monument in your mind, a landmark that proves you were valuable. Returning to this partner is like walking back to that landmark and touching it just to ensure it's still real.
It's like visiting your childhood home. You just want to check that the walls are still standing.
Yes. It keeps the memory alive. It prevents the past from becoming finished. If you stop going back, that era of your life is officially over. It's dead. But if you go back,
You reactivate the choice in the present, even if the present version is a hollow shell of the past one.
you're trying to keep the ghost alive. Precisely. And Malha notes that these contradictory feelings, knowing it's not mutual but wanting to return, they just coexist uneasily.
It's not that one cancels the other out. You feel smart and stupid at the same time. You feel safe and empty at the same time.
The definition of it's complicated.
For sure. But surely there's a cost to this, aside from just, wasting time or waking up with a regret hangover.
Mala argues the cost is what he calls erosion, and he's very careful here. He insists this isn't a moral failure. He's not wagging his finger at you.
Okay.
But he talks about a slow narrowing of what feels possible.
Erosion implies wearing something down over time. What is being worn down?
Your tolerance for reality.
Oof. Explain that.
Well, think about what a real healthy relationship requires. It's negotiation, it's compromise, it's whose turn is it to do the dishes, it's dealing with in-laws, it's awkward silences, it's heavy.
Work. It's a lot of friction.
It's high friction work. Now compare that to the chosen dynamic with the ex. You get the validation, the intimacy, and the physical release with zero friction. It's streamlined.
It's the high fructose corn syrup of relationships.
That is the perfect analogy. And Mala's warning is that if you consume enough of that syrup, the real thing, the protein, the vegetables, the actual sustenance of a real partner, starts to taste bland. It feels too hard.
So you're not just wasting time with the ex.
Yeah.
You're actually retraining your brain to reject real intimacy because it feels like too much effort.
Precisely. You are narrowing the scope of what you think you can handle. That is the erosion. Mala warns that the simplicity of the chooser-chosen dynamic constrains your growth. You get addicted to the shortcut.
That is genuinely scary. You get so hooked on the quick hit that you forget how to cook a meal.
And secretly, beneath the surface, this pattern shapes your self-worth. You start measuring your value by these short-term metrics. How quickly do they reply? How easily can I re-enter their attention?
You are testing your worth without having to ask directly. It's like checking the stock market of your own desirability.
And like any market, it fluctuates. You can crash, which leads to the cycle of provisional answers. Malha notes that the relief you get from this is incredibly unstable. It decays quickly.
The sugar crash. You feel great for an hour, maybe a morning, and then the doubt just creeps back in.
And because the relief decays, you have to return again. It triggers the next loop. Malha frames this as a way to repeatedly answer one specific question.
Do I still matter here? That's the question haunting the whole interaction.
It is. But the answer you get from an ex in this context is only provisional. It's a yes for tonight. It's not a yes for the future. And Malha has a very poignant observation about the nature of hope in these situations.
He says the hope isn't expansive, right? Which feels contradictory because isn't hope always about the future?
Usually, yes. Hope is about building something, going somewhere. But here, the hope is not expansive. It doesn't imagine a future. It only imagines a renewed present.
It strips the moment of context and consequences.
Exactly. You aren't hoping to get married. You're just hoping to feel that feeling again, right now. You want to freeze time.
It's like pressing the refresh button on a web page, hoping it loads the way it did 3 years ago.
And ignoring the error message that pops up every single time.
So we've unpacked the mechanism, the validation, the dangerous erosion. The big question is, how do we stop? Does Mullah give us a 5-step plan? A mantra?
He does not. And I think that is actually the strength of the essay, even if it's frustrating. He points out that the experience remains suspended between awareness and repetition. There is no clean exit point in the text.
Which is annoying, but also honest. Because in real life, you don't just read an article and suddenly stop having feelings.
Malha reflects on the sadness inherent in this. It's not an angry essay, it's a sad one. It's the sadness of recognizing that you were seeking confirmation, not intimacy. And realizing the other person actually cannot provide more than that.
They can't give you what you actually need.
No, they can't give you validation of your soul. They can only give you a body for an hour. Often they don't even know they're being asked to provide this massive existential proof.
They think they're just hooking up. You're secretly asking them to prove you're worthy of love.
Precisely. The arrangement persists not because it nourishes you, but because it answers that question, do I still matter? Even if the answer is so fleeting.
It's a temporary fix for a permanent need. It's treading water when you need to be swimming to shore.
And that brings us to the final thought I'd love for our listener to really chew on. It's something Mala alludes to, the idea of being chosen as a currency.
A currency we've grown accustomed to spending.
Yeah. If you have spent a long time, maybe years, using this dynamic as your primary way of feeling valuable, how difficult is it to relinquish that currency, even if you know it's bad for you?
It's hard to walk away from the only paycheck you know, even if the job is dead end.
Exactly. You're terrified of being poor, of having zero validation. To stop being chosen means you have to sit with the silence of not being chosen by anyone for a while. You have to sit with your own ordinariness, and that takes immense courage.
That is a profound place to leave it. We want to ask you, the listener, where in your life might you be accepting confirmation as a substitute for connection? Are you settling for being chosen when what you really want is to be known?
It's a question we're sitting with, even if the answer is uncomfortable.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.